Chelsea 4, Southampton 0. Chelsea end a run of 3 defeats. It's actually the most goals we've scored in a Premier League game since the win over Tottenham in early December. Goals from Christopher Nkunku, Pedro Neto, Levi, Colwill and Marc Cucurella, and that win gets Chelsea back into the top 4, at least for the time being, until the rest of this week's Premier League games have taken place. I am Daniel Childs. This is my review of last night's game. A game that Chelsea simply had to win for a variety of reasons, off-pitch reasons, but on-pitch reasons, and especially if we have any aim of recovering our form and getting Champions League football. You can throw a lot of caveats into this game. Yes, Southampton are one of the worst Premier League teams we have ever seen. By the end of the season, they may be deemed the worst Premier League team of all time, because of just how bad they are defensively, how many stupid errors they gave away. I mean, that was exposed the last time we played Southampton. But listen, we celebrated that win when Southampton were bad, so I think we should be celebrating this win. And until we play Arsenal, the 2 games against Copenhagen and Leicester, Chelsea have got a chance to at least bag some wins here and get the confidence up. And I think last night was not only hopefully the start of that recovery under Maresca, but also I think most notably something I spoke about in my preview in regards to our attack that I'll get into. So please like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. We obviously have to talk about the protest a little bit here, because that was a part of last night's game. Even if it didn't happen inside the stadium, I think it'd be silly to not mention it, to how my thoughts on it and what's going to happen maybe after it. So I was supposed to go to the game. Unfortunately, an emergency meant that I wasn't at the game. So I was watching a lot of the coverage pre-game and seeing how TNT were covering, looking online and seeing how people were reacting to it. I have to say I was a little bit frustrated by the mixed messaging of it. I have to be honest. One of my early thoughts, if you go back and watch my shows from, I think it was last week, I was like, well, you can't really expect a protest to always be coherent. But I think there is still that reality, no matter what Chelsea fans did for this protest. But then also, I kind of think that there were so many varying messages from that protest that it gets slightly lost in the mess of it all, really, that people start to take different things from it and maybe you're not getting your full message across. However, the biggest problem with it, I think the lack of Benedict Barley's name, the lack of Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart's name were kind of key. But that's just my personal opinion. Like that, in priority, I think that's who should be at the front and centre of this. I think having a banner that the only big face on that banner was Todd Bowley, I think, plays into the narrative. This is the guy running things. That doesn't mean he's, not responsible for any criticism or anything that's gone wrong. But I think the good thing was that, Joe Cole spoke to DJ Only a Pound, David Johnston, who I write obviously for the CFC fanzine, and I think he gave a really nice interview pre-game, so it was good to see that. And also, just based on TNT and based on some of the things I've seen from articles, there is at least now a link between Chelsea and Clearlake, and Clearlake is a lot more present in kind of general media discussion than they were a year ago. So I think that's a positive, and as I've consistently stated, I fully support fans' right to protest. I fully support the fact that fans feel frustrated, feel disconnected with the club currently. I think that is an overwhelming majority of people, even if they were not protesting, obviously, outside Stamford Bridge. I do think the general tone around Chelsea supporters at the moment is one of frustration in different corners. But, I think that maybe this will start a bigger mass protest movement. We will see how it plays out for the rest of this season. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's move on to the game. The lineup. Maresca played it safe. I think that was the obvious thing that came to mind when I looked at that team. It was kind of just, I'm sticking with the personnel, the more experienced personnel. I'm not going to take any major risks. You look at result, hindsight, it worked out. I personally would have liked to have seen Tyreek George given a start, Josh Achimpong given a start. Does that make that much of a difference to the game? I'm not entirely sure given the level of opponent, but that's what it was. It was a very cagey start. Now, I think in some ways, does that play into what's happened recently? Absolutely. Has that got anything to do with what happened outside the ground? I'm not entirely sure, because as the game progressed, that didn't really factor into Chelsea's performances. But I do think that undeniably, Chelsea and this slow possession style just doesn't blend. It doesn't mesh. And I don't even think it's just an aesthetic preference of Chelsea fans. I just think people look at the team against the worst team in the Premier League, and the fact we still look cagey playing out from the back, it just looks like a team that isn't good enough or isn't really gelling with what Maresca wants his team to do. And I didn't really like the comments post-game by Maresca. You know, he's just so adamant about this style of football, so adamant that it's the right way to go. And I just think the more we've watched it this season, especially against better opposition, Chelsea have looked worse. Jorgensen made a really good save in the first half, and hopefully that bigs up his confidence. And a clean sheet too. Chelsea have desperately needed to keep a clean sheet for some time. But I do think that, you know, there's nothing wrong with hitting the ball over the top. And as we saw in this game, as I've consistently said about this Chelsea team, I think we have the tools to be a good transitional team, a more direct team. I think the moment we start caving into this, whether you call it JDP or, you know, control ball, Chelsea look like a severely worse football team. They don't look like the same team. The energy drops, and I think teams have found out where our weaknesses is, where are the pressing triggers to go out and to try and isolate. And even a team as poor and as badly out of form and going back down to the Championship as Southampton, they even got some of that. However, because it is Southampton, it didn't take much, you know, prodding of that defence to finally expose it. And it was great to see us actually score a set-piece goal. Tosin knocking it down for Christopher Nkunku at the back post. Joe Cole at half-time called it a William Gallas goal. You know, you think back to years ago when JT would knock down the ball at the near post at the shed end, and Gallas would be coming around the corner. So a bit of a French connection there. Between Nkunku and Gallas, and listen, Nkunku desperately needed last night to go well for him because he has been under a lot of scrutiny for his performances, and now he's finally getting minutes that he didn't get in the first half of the season, and I expect that will probably continue under Maresca. He needs to take his opportunities, even if it isn't in the position he wants to play. He just needed a goal, and he absolutely got it. From there, listen, Chelsea completely dominated. I do think a major part of that in that first half especially was Enzo Fernandez, who was the first player to create 5+ chances, win 5+ duels, and win possession 5 times in a Premier League game multiple times this season. So that was Bournemouth last month, and also, of course, last night against Southampton. Fernandez playing up, you know, further up the pitch and having that license to turn and look into space. He just looks like a very different footballer. I still think that the issue you've got with Fernandez against the better quality of opposition is the structure behind him. And I think we've seen in recent weeks that through tiredness, through fatigue, through poor decision making, or just through the fact that there just isn't enough room to cover him, you need protection behind him. But when he does have that protection, or he does have that room and license to move the ball forward, he can be quite a devastating player creatively, and we saw that last night. The Neto goal, the second, I mean, again, in so many ways, it exposes how stupid a team Southampton are. Downs giving the ball away in a really bad area. Cucurella plays Nkunku through. Nkunku cuts inside a little bit, and perfectly timed ball to Pedro Neto, who rifles the ball home. I feel like this is the perfect time to talk about this celebration from Pedro Neto that he did against West Ham, and Levi did it after his goal. To me, it looked like a celebration that was not aimed at Southampton fans. It was aimed probably at the home fans, and I have to say, I just don't see the need for it. I don't see the need for a group that has not achieved anything yet, that has objectively, no matter what way you try and spin it, has been on a terrible run of form since mid-December, kind of having a go at their fans as they're celebrating the goal you've just scored. I don't understand it at all. I think on a night when Chelsea needed to start to turn the pendulum back in a positive way, I think what you're just asking for is people to further dislike you as a player. And to be honest, I think that the you know, most of the ire from Chelsea fans has actually not been aimed at the players. It has been aimed above them, which is quite rare. But I think it has been that, and it's like they're asking even a guy like Levi from the club's academy, who would naturally endear himself and get a lot of support from home supporters. I don't like it. I think it shows a sign in some ways of immaturity from the group, which is something that's been talked about a lot of the time. But listen, it's a small thing, but I just hope it doesn't continue. They get out of their system for Southampton. If I see it again in upcoming games and Chelsea start winning games and they're still doing it, I think they're asking for trouble personally. But I didn't really like that. It was kind of a sour note on what was a really positive game for Chelsea. But listen, 2-0 cruising. Another set-piece goal, this time Pedro Neto curling the ball in for Levi, 3-0, really good header, and good to see us finally scoring from some set-pieces, because we've had the set-piece coach Quaver from the summer, but we haven't really taken much advantage of it. So good to see we're starting to make some set-pieces work. Listen, let's talk a little bit now about Pedro Neto. I think obviously the big choice that Maresca made at the weekend was to start Neto in the central position. Neto plays it again, scores. I think looks like a really integral player. His movement's good. I think he's very direct, especially in transition. He's got that speed that can really hurt a lot of defenses. Even if it's just a bit of a distraction and he can open up space for others, I do think he can be a nuisance. And listen, it's a makeshift option for a long-term problem. There's no two ways about it. Unless Neto really transforms now into a clinical centre-forward, we can't say that for certain or not, but I think it's unlikely. However, Maresca needed to find an alternative, and I've got to give some credit to CFC Central, who suggested playing Neto in this role, and I think as soon as Maresca has done it, it started to work. I also just think Neto, again, you talk about that transition game and you think about his performances in the past for Wolves against Chelsea, actually, and I think that was something that Central brought up in that kind of central role, playing against the high line, being able to break at pace and speed. And when you've got a player like Enzo Fernandez who can play those balls over the top, Caicedo, I think is really good, actually. I think it's an underrated part of his game is passing, especially passes around the corner, which we saw against Aston Villa. So I think for Neto, I'd stick with Neto, give him this run in the team. Hopefully the goal last night and the performances recently start to gain him some confidence and hopefully produces a strong end to the season. Because as we saw last night, an unfortunate quirk and trend we've seen in recent weeks is suddenly Cole Palmer losing all form and all clinical edge in front of goal. Really weird to see, because for his first year at Chelsea over that, he's been outstanding in front of goal, but it's just completely left him. And for some perspective, I'd rather Palmer miss the amount of chances he did last night in a game like Southampton, where we're cruising anyway. I hope he's able to find his shooting boots by the time we face tougher and sterner tests, and especially in the run into the Conference League and the run into the Premier League, and especially when we face Arsenal next month. You're not going to get as many chances. He needs to find that finishing touch again. Is it confidence training? Does it become a natural thing where you miss a few chances and then desperation comes in because it's playing on your mind? It's hard to think of that with Palmer because he's been so cool, so casual. Everyone kind of thinks that he's playing at a different kind of temperature and just coolness, right? Cole Palmer, but unfortunately doesn't feel like that at the moment. But hopefully, and I back Palmer, that he will find that finishing touch again. But I think it is a positive that it isn't just Palmer, right? You need to start having goals elsewhere, varied goals around the team, and we started to see that last night. The second half was a lot more casual, felt like a training session, felt like Southampton were just kind of there, let's try not to concede another 3 goals before we leave this game. Good to see Tyreek George come on. He assists the full for Cucurella, really good pass. Really calm pass. George is trying really hard. He still has this ability where, and this kind of knack where he's so desperate to score a goal, when at times maybe a pass, a kind of calmer head, you lay it into Cole Palmer. He has a shot that goes over the bar quite early on after coming off the bench. But I can understand George's kind of motivation and willingness to do something, because he hasn't had many opportunities. So maybe in his mind, he's like, this is the only opportunity I'm going to get. And unlike some other players who get bundles of opportunities and don't take them, he is hungry to take that opportunity. I hope he will get more, because the pass into Cucurella was really calm, really composed. And Cucurella with another goal. I kind of find it funny that Cucurella's got a signature celebration now, which kind of signals how good of a goal scorer he's been, given his position. And then obviously that was 4-0. Josh Akchimpong and Shimwaka came on as well. Matisse Amagu, I mean, we didn't expect him to play at all for the rest of this season. But it was kind of one of those games. Good to see Akchimpong off the bench. Shim as well, he comes on, he gives a wink to Enzo Fernandez, who he's replacing, and he literally comes on in the 90th minute and almost scores with his first touch. He's got a big presence about him. I know many people have wanted to see Shim get some minutes for the first team. You've got the Conference League returning now. Hopefully Chelsea progress smoothly in that. I'd like to see him get some more minutes. There's no centre-forward option at the moment. So I think it is imperative that Maresca looks to find inventive or internal solutions to this problem until Nicholas Jackson and Marc return. That's the big challenge for Maresca. And I just think generally Maresca needs to find productivity where he can. He needs to find a way to reignite something in this season. Especially, I said this in my preview. I think this was borne out last night, and I think it will be borne out for the rest of the season. I think Chelsea's aim between now and the end of the year is to get that attack clicking. It sounds kind of obvious, but I can't see that defence getting much better. I think the priority should be to return to where we were pre-Christmas, basically, or kind of where we were when we last played Southampton, when that team was able to outscore you willing to move forward, looked dangerous every time they moved forward. There were goals coming from different areas. The productivity was at such a better level and higher level than it had been in recent years. That is where I think the kind of the energy should be. My concern still is that Maresca is adamant about his style of football, and I just don't think that's going to make Chelsea much better. But listen, if confidence and finishing improves over the next few weeks, you don't know where we'll be kind of psychologically and mentally by the time we travel to the Emirates, because of course Arsenal are not in amazing shape at the moment, but that's obviously going to be a huge game and I think quite a defining game. But you want to get to that game next month with a good run of performances and victories, which hopefully we can get. So that was it. You know, a 4-0 win. Chelsea simply had to find a win, but I guess in some ways it was kind of one of those games where you can't really win because Southampton are so bad that anything other than a comfortable 3 points would have looked a little bit concerning. But it is a positive night in what has been a really bad run for Chelsea. I said this in my preview. I've said it almost for a month now, and it's amazing to me that it's still remained the same. This Premier League is not one of the strongest. I think many people have realised that and have noticed that. Below Liverpool, basically, and I guess you could argue Arsenal because they've got a little bit of a points gap. You are talking about a run-in for the Champions League that is going to be so unpredictable. It does mean that Chelsea do not have a stable place. They don't have a comfort. But I guess in some ways the comfort is that you are not out of the picture. And Chelsea have been truly terrible relegation form since mid-December. But, you know, you win a couple of games, which Chelsea had the ability to with Southampton and Leicester coming up. And Chelsea are suddenly back in the top four, at least neck and neck with other teams. And you've probably got that safety net of fifth place. So it shows that the season is not over by any stretch of the imagination. I think what's concerned people is, and I don't think people have been wrong for suggesting this, the performances and the results since mid-December have been abysmal, basically. And as games have gone on and very little has changed, there's a fear that, and you couple that with injuries, you know, shortening options from Maresca, would that really halt any chance of Chelsea recovering? And by the time they do recover, has the season already gone beyond them? But Man City consistently, you know, make errors and will continue to lose games. Aston Villa lost heavily last night. The frustration is that, listen, we couldn't beat Aston Villa and there is no getting around this. Chelsea probably have to win a big game or two between now and the end of the season. That, I think, is undeniable when you look at the run-in post these two kind of bankable games, hopefully for Chelsea in the Premier League at home to Leicester and Southampton. That is a massive test. That's something Maresca hasn't really done so far. This group, Chelsea, haven't done basically since this ownership came in, is win one of these big games against one of the big rivals. Chelsea are going to have to do it a few times if they want to get Champions League football. But in some ways, the situation is still there. The opportunity is still there to recover this season, which it wasn't last year. So hopefully this is the turning point. It wasn't as big a turning point as beating Villa at the weekend, but maybe slow and steady Chelsea can recover something this season. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.